and the lens of our customer and what they're looking for and what is a value proposition that will be compelling for them. There's no doubt about the demand. You've gotten some great numbers from Justin about demand. But what I want to look at is, what is it? In essence, I've titled my comments to you this morning, "The Senior Living Value Proposition, a Continuum of What?" And what that continuum is, I think is going to be absolutely essential for the future in terms of the success that we have with all this demand that's coming. And because fundamentally, what Justin did a great job of going through some history of the industry and sort of different periods and cycles of the industry. But one way I might sum it up is that the period of 1990 to 2020 in particular was the period of what I would call, it was the first generation of private pay senior living product. It was the really growth and explosion of that private pay senior assisted living, and then memory care, independent living. I would consider the decade we're in now, 2020 to 2030, as a transitional decade. And the next generation of senior living product will be 2030 to 2060. During this transitional decade, what are we transitioning? We're transitioning to a new customer. We're transitioning to new leadership, enormous changes in leadership across companies. Many executives, quite frankly, held on during COVID, because in time of crisis, you don't leave the ship. And now we're seeing a wave of retirements. And we're seeing, in a good sense, a new blood and younger leadership stepping in. And in addition to a new customer and new leadership, I think we're also going to have new products. And I think our product's going to look differently, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because the bottom line of what I want to leave you with is this sense. We are an industry, partly because of all the demand that Justin has outlined to you, that is poised for disruption, to be disrupted. The question is, will we be the disruptors, or will we be the ones that are disrupted? In business, when you're disrupted by someone else, it usually means you go out of business. Sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. You think of Blockbuster and Netflix as an example. And so, in a time of disruption, you want to be on the side of the disruptor, not the ones being disrupted. And that's, again, what I want to chat about with you some in my time with you this morning. Now, looking ahead to the next 3 to 10 years, I think there are some really sort of basic questions that it's important that everyone be asking and sort of knowing in terms of what is it I'm trying to do with my company, with my community. I put it this way, very simply. Who are you serving? Where and how are you serving them? And how are you getting paid? What do I mean by who are you serving? Well, just for instance, when we think about older adults, well, that means people 65 to 110 today. Sometimes a little older than that. By the end of this decade, we'll be serving people that are living to 115, 118. But that's a huge range. So, 40, 45-year range. So are you seeking to serve folks that are in their 60s and 70s, in their 80s and 90s, or in their 100s? Who are you serving in terms of income and assets? And don't use average numbers. Average numbers, when there are huge differences in the extremes, don't actually tell you anything. Average numbers, when you take just on income, people that have enormous income and people that have very little income, and then you average them, And if you do any decisions based on averages, you won't do well. Because you're looking at a specific target and a specific audience, and you need to understand what their assets and what their ability to pay is, not what the average ability to pay is. And many mistakes have been made in business because people used averages and didn't realize that not a single customer that moves into your building is an average customer. So, who are you serving by need? Cognitive needs, physical needs, social needs, emotional needs, mental health needs. So you have all these different layers. But then secondly, you have another customer. And Justin closed on this note. And that customer is your staff. They're actually your first customer. Because if you don't serve them well, you won't serve the second customer successfully. And so, what about staff? Well, in the future, for instance, and we'll get into this a little bit more, you'll have a workforce, if you don't today, where you'll have a 3, and in some instances, 4-generation workforce. You'll have folks 16 and 86. How does that multi-generational workforce function? How do you think about that? Bear in mind that absent immigration reform that isn't looking very promising anytime soon, the single largest untapped workforce in America today, available to every single one of us, is older adults between the ages of 55 and 85. You just heard Justin's numbers about folks turning 18. So anyone that has a great hope about all these young people being the workforce of tomorrow, everyone's going to be competing for a diminishing resource, the number of young people. The single greatest untapped labor resource in America today is people between the ages of 55 and 85. And companies that learn how to tap that group, and we should be leaders in that, not followers, are going to have an enormous competitive advantage. So,